Get me a lozenge. Oh, the singer. Pull up. That was Despondency, the track titled Existence of the Smay, the first track off of their 2008 album, I believe it was. Revelation 4, Rise of the Nemesis. Make sure I'm not fucking not, because I only remember it as Rise of the Nemesis. Yep, Revelation 4, Rise of the Nemesis. All right, let me pull up this and then we can get into it. Yeah, the words, they don't even I don't even know if that record has lyrics. The vocals are more so an instrument unto themselves. But the record label's Brutal Bands. The record label's closed, so I highly doubt the band themselves will fucking find my stream just to give me a copyright strike. So okay. Sorry everyone. I'm having a little bit of trouble finding fucking. You sent me this link. I close it and I don't bookmark it. I don't know why I do this to myself every time. Oh, buddy. What we got up in here so far? 19 shatters already. Lunant Crown. Why am I infested with bots now? Not a bot def 8, not a bot def 9. This is unreal. Like, yeah, I'm going into Discord. I'm just looking at my fucking view count. It's infested with bots. I know you DM'd it. There it is. I got it. So I just rolled my black ass out of bed like 30 minutes ago. So if this is a little scuffed at first, bear with me. You could probably still hear in my voice I haven't completely woken up yet. And I might fuck around if I can, that is, if I can find my fucking adapter. I might get a 3D print started while we're doing this, but I seem to have lost my SD card adapter. Should have looked for it last night. Could that have possibly gone to? Like, how would something like that grow legs? Okay, so what up, Wither King? Actually, kind of a little bit distraught about. Um. Oh shit. At least I bought a new. I got a new soldering iron a couple weeks ago. So I can learn how to solder. And I got this really sweet fucking driver set while I was, as an impulse buy while I was buying new filament. I won't say I needed it, but I also, it's better to have and not need than need and not have. So I went ahead and copped it. What up, Lucky SOB? I'll hold up a little. I'll stall for a little bit longer. Let some more people come in because I don't think people know I'm live. Even I told everyone I was going live this time last night when I had like 40 some people in here. What did I do with my fucking adapter? And what the fuck? Can't even get a print going. It's usually right on my desk. Clean my. I'm wondering. So here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if I can use because I have this adapter. And I'm wondering if I use this in there, could I use. Let's find out. So how's everybody doing today? Before I get too deep into this rabbit hole, everybody feeling good? Everybody all right? It's Black History Month. Be honest with you, I don't even know what I would print anyway. I still have to look for something to print, so I'm just gonna put that off for now. I'm gonna get into the book. Rocking like a motherfucker. I feel illegal. Okay. Um, I'm gonna go fill my water bottle. With breakfast, making more pancakes and hash browns right now. Dope. I'm gonna fill my water bottle really quick. I'll be back, just because I don't feel like going to get water in the middle of reading because I know I'm gonna get hoarse. So I will be back momentarily. Uh, I'll do. It's not back. Alrighty. I'm back, y'all. Here I be. Here I is. Oh my god. And hey, there's my fucking adapter. I'm fucking silly. How did I not see that? Everything off the desk now. Okay. Alright. Does my be right back screen not have a chat? Alright, whatever. Here we go. Let me I have to make a phone call really quick. I can't believe I'm so fucking stupid. What time is it? 11:20. I'll be back in at 11:30 to start up immediately with the book. So, I'm so fucking stupid. I didn't get paid yesterday. I have no idea why, so I have to fucking call my bank and see what's up with my direct deposit. Because I really need that money because I'm officially completely fucking broke. I have no clue what I'm gonna do if I don't get paid. So while I do that, I'll throw a loop on. One do I? Oh, that's a new song. I was. All right, I'll be back. Sorry, y'all. I'm doing this shit with the fucking robot on the phone, and it's so fucking stupid. So yeah, I put the wrong fucking routing number in for my direct deposit. So that's fun. Um, what the fuck, man? So I'm just gonna be broke all week now, I guess. I have no idea what. I don't even have enough fucking gas to get to it. Anyway, sorry, it's not your problem. Let's start reading this. Fuck. I have to call. All right. Chapter 3, Circus Africanus. No, I don't get a. I mean, what they told me is that if they probably can't do a stop payment because the check is already the check is already through. So, um, if what'll happen is if the account doesn't actually exist, it'll just get the money back and then I'll get a paper check. But like, I don't know. I have to go to my mom's to see if they sent me a paper check. Anyway, let's read this shit. The popular display of black bodies. By 1904, swashbuckling missionary explorer Samuel Phillips Werner had acquired a veritable Noah's Ark of exotic fauna during 3 trips to the interior of the Dark Continent. The last expedition was commissioned in 1903 by the St. Louis Exposition Company, which paid the South Carolina born Werner to hunt men instead of monkeys. He was to bring African pygmies to America for display at the St. Louis World's Fair. Upon his return to America, Werner found himself romanticized as a reincarnation of Dr. David Livingstone, whom he claimed as his posthumous mentor. As an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church, Werner was also lionized in church circles as an imparter of morality to the Congo natives he doggedly hectored at the Southern Presbyterian Missionary House in Weibo, chiding them for their immodest dress and sexual behavior. His American admirers did not know that between 1895 and 1899, Werner had fathered a daughter and son on an African orphan from an had fathered a daughter and son on an African orphan girl there. By 1906, the World's Fair was over, and the cash-strapped Werner was selling off his animals, artifacts, and more. Upon the receipt of a financial gift, he bestowed a prized equatorial specimen upon William T. Hornaday, director of the Bronx Zoological Gardens. Werner's present was 23-year-old Oda Benga, an Mbuti widower from southern Africa and what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. Around 1903, Benga had returned from a hunting trip only to find his village in smoking ruins and his wife, children, and entire tribe slaughtered by force publique thugs supported by the Belgian government. Benga himself was seized and sold into Werner's hands. This is people. Not too many people know about King Leopold and how absolutely fucking horrendous Belgium was in the Congo. What's now known as Congo. Um, it might be actually called something different now. Let me just double check on that. Nope, it's still the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So Yeah, and in the interior of the continent of Africa, Belgium essentially went there for rubber. And they did all the stuff that you hear about um Christopher Columbus doing to people. They did through and through. But anyway, Hornaday's views about the natives of sub-Saharan Africa mirrored Werner's own, conscripting Darwin in the service of racism. He told the New York Times that there exists a close analogy of the African savage to apes. There's a link there. Whoops. Scientific American agreed. The Congo pygmies are small, ape like, elfish creatures, furtive and mischievous. They closely parallel the brownies and goblins of our fairy tales. They live in the dense, tangled forests in absolute savagery, while they exhibit many ape like features in their bodies. But Hornaday espoused the more progressive vision as a scientific artist, and we have him to thank for the modern American zoo. As chief taxidermist of the National Museum, the Smithsonian, a position he held until 1890, he had inherited a static mausoleum of tatty taxidermy enshrined on plaster pedestals with only laconic placards to suggest what the animal had been like in life. In 1888, Hornaday persuaded the museum to add a wing of living animals in lifelike settings, which proved so popular a revolution that it became the National Zoological Gardens. He resigned over differences of vision, but in 1896 he reemerged as the first director of the New York Zoological Gardens, known as the Bronx Zoo. The world's largest, lushest, and most varied zoo. Hornaday's passion was for colorful verisimilitude in the recreation of his animals' natural habitats. With the verdant Bronx Park as his canvas, Hornaday installed colorful exotic animals of every genus grouped with their natural companions amid native vegetation. The Baltimore Zoo I am not a huge fan of zoos, but the Baltimore Zoo is pretty cool, I guess. So when Benga was locked in the monkey house, before the staring crowd and with keepers always nearby, he was given a bow and arrow to brandish. His cage was littered with bones, and his two cage mates were Dinah, a gorilla, and an orangutan called Doang. The placard on Benga's enclosure read, "The African Pygmy, Ota Benga, height 4 feet 11 inches, weight 103 pounds. Brought from the Kasai River, Congo Free State, South Central Africa, by Dr. Samuel P. Werner. Exhibited each afternoon during September." A September 10th New York Times headline trumpeted, "Bushman shares a cage with the Bronx Park apes." Black New Yorkers were incensed, and representatives of the clergy, led by the Reverend Dr. MacArthur, pressed Mayor George B. McClellan to withdraw the city's support from the exhibit. As another minister, a Reverend Gordon, told the New York Times, "Our race is depressed enough without exhibiting one of us with the apes. We think we are worthy of being considered human beings with souls." The Times turned an unsympathetic ear to African American objections. One Reverend colored brother objects to the curious exhibition on the grounds that it is an impious effort to lend credibility to Darwin's dreadful theories. The Reverend colored brother should be told that evolution is now taught in the textbooks of all schools and that it is no more debatable than the multiplication table. Wild. The swipe at creationism did not address Gordon's immediate concerns, but did hit a nerve among many whites who shared Gordon's outrage. Some were angered by this inhumane insult to blacks, and others who opposed the teaching of Darwin's theory of evolution were afraid that Benga's dramatic presence would offer a powerful plebeian argument for the theory of evolution. The entertainment of a monkey man might persuade people who were untouched by the theory's scientific merits. Mayor McClellan snubbed the black delegation, referring them to the Parks Department, and another Times account hinted that Benga differed little from the zoo's animals. Oda Benga is a normal specimen of his race or tribe, with a brain as much developed as are those of its other members, and can be studied with profit. The Pygmies are an efficient people in their native forests, but they are very low in the human scale, and the suggestion that Benga should be in a school instead of a cage ignores the high probability that school would be a place of torture to him, and one from which he could withdraw no advantage whatever. So they literally are just saying, we're not even smart enough to be in school. That's why they have to put us in cages. Sound familiar? A lively epistolatory debate ensued in the pages of the Times, heavily weighted in favor of retaining Benga, and many of the letters were signed by respondents with MD and PhD degrees. One doctor suggested, "It is a pity that Dr. Hornaday does not introduce a system of short lectures or talks in connection with such exhibitions, to help our clergymen to familiarize themselves with the scientific point of view so foreign to many of them." Times journalists agreed that Benga provided a valuable tool for illustrating basic evolutionary precepts. To oppose his internment was to oppose science. These precepts included physical similarities to the lower primates that scientific racism was beginning to popularize widely. Anthropometric portraits of blacks and apes demonstrated how blacks' facial angles, stature, stance, and gait resembled those of monkeys, chimpanzees, and orangutans. Blacks' hair, or wool, was compared to animal pellets. Such uncomplimentary images were published in scientific journals and would soon adorn children's textbooks. They taught children this. Scientists alleged that apes preferred to mate with black women, just as black men lusted after white women, their evolutionary betters. I'm going to say that again. Scientists allege that apes preferred to mate with black women just as black men lusted after white women, their evolutionary betters. I'm actually gonna... I know Bink Princess will get a kink out of this. All right. At the zoo, the Times revealed that Benga's situation was escalating. There were 40,000 visitors to the park on Sunday. Nearly every man, woman, and child of this crowd made for the monkey house to see the star attraction in the park, the wild man from Africa. They chased him about the grounds all day, howling, jeering, and yelling. Some of them poked him in the ribs, others tripped him up, all laughed at him. Finally, Benga retaliated by attacking visitors with a knife and a bow and arrows, and the zoo ejected him. Black New Yorkers organized a collection which was insufficient to return him home as he wished, but provided enough to cap his filed teeth and send him to the Virginia Theological Seminary and College, where he proved himself an able student. Benga then found work in a Lynchburg, Virginia tobacco factory, where he fit in well as an efficient worker and a beloved Pied Piper who taught local children to fish and hunt. But he spoke often and tearfully of wishing to return home to the Congo, and when he realized he could never save enough for passage, his depression became profound. In 1916, Benga committed suicide with that ubiquitous icon of Western technological achievement, a handgun. Hornaday had the last word in his obituary of Benga, which appeared in the Zoological Bulletin, took a semi-comic tone, and was filled with uncomplimentary untruths that fit his racist agenda. I'm imagining they said he killed himself because black people don't know how to deal with freedom. Benga's tragedy illustrates how American scientists found black bodies useful even when they were not trying new medications or surgeries. This chapter focuses upon the popular public display and imaging of black bodies. But the boundary separating popular display from medical display was a porous one, a permeable membrane with copious migration in both directions. Some medicalized freak body types were exclusive to blacks who had a patent on white Negroes. It's probably albinos. And in the United States, a near monopoly on primitive peoples. Even the black idiot savant, a perennial attraction, was considered more freakish than the white variety because his intellectual gifts offered a greater contrast to blacks' ostensibly low intelligence. In the late 18th century, long before the 1859 publication of The Origin of Species, medical researchers had addressed scientific questions regarding human hierarchies by displaying black bodies in contexts that emphasized supposed parallels to animals and children, even as black scientists and abolitionists used the same bodies to illustrate the intimate kinship between whites and blacks. Unusual or exotic black bodies also provided wildly popular entertainment with a medical flavor. Alert entrepreneurs, from P.T. Barnum to Harvard Louis Agassiz, exploited them for profit and fame. Whether one was gawking at a white Negro, a 161-year-old black wet nurse, an African giantess, or a Hottentot missing link in a cage, the subject was usually forced to display his body. He may have been a slave, a freak with an anomalous body, or a kidnapped freedman. However, a few enterprising souls offered themselves up for pay, especially in the early days of quasi-scientific displays. Around 1790, when Henry Moss realized that his body had embarked upon a mystifying transformation into whiteness, he cut out the middleman to exhibit himself. He probably had vitiligo. Unlike later sideshow freaks who had to remain mute while barkers trumpeted the manufactured exotica that passed for their life stories, Moss was his own barker. Proudly straddling a museum chair or slowly strolling the stage of a saloon, Moss peeled the linen from his variegated body in a tantalizing medical striptease while he unreeled his own story. From his humble but free 1754 birth in Goochland County, Virginia, to his Revolutionary War exploits as a soldier in South Carolina and Virginia, the mysterious gradual lightening that was spreading his fame, Moss spoke for himself before enraptured crowds in Philadelphia taverns and museums, charging 25 cents per person. Heady fees for 1796, the year he addressed the American Philosophical Society. Moss became a familiar figure even in Europe, where his piebald visage graced chocolates and German almanacs. President George Washington was a face in the throng when Moss appeared at Mr. Leach's Tavern, the sign of the Black Horse, in Philadelphia in 1796. So were prominent racial theorists of the day, including the Reverend Samuel Stanhope Smith and an entranced Benjamin Rush, M.D., who is now remembered as the father of American psychiatry and who then believed that black skin was the manifestation of a type of leprosy that he called negritude. Calling blacks lepers certainly sounds like the pronouncement of an inveterate racist, and this is how Rush is sometimes regarded. However, Rush was not a racist, but a passionate abolitionist, and his views of blacks' physiology were nuanced. See, this is what we're talking about when we talk about the people from the American Colonization Society, the pack them up on the boat and send them back to Africa people. And this gets into how it's very easy to participate in white supremacy and perpetuate white supremacist tropes when you don't have the proper understanding. Rush believed that blacks were diseased, but they could be cured. He welcomed the various albinos, leucothopes, and vitiligo-stricken white Negroes as hopeful monsters, living proof that blacks could become healthily white. Cure was desirable, averred Rush, because eliminating black skin would eliminate the chief social and religious argument for enslavement, and because he believed blacks themselves preferred white skin. Damn. Where have I heard that before? Couldn't be in a fucking Vosh VOD, could it? Are we describing Vosh right now? He's racist, but he's not racist. You know what I mean? He's well intentioned. He just happens to accidentally be racist as fuck consistently. Sorry, I had to look at my phone for a sec. There's so many bots in here, it's unreal. So at what point did they realize our dark skin is actually an advantage? Well, I went over that in the first couple of chapters of the book where they thought that it was an advantage. And we'll get to it later because that same trope reappeared during, after World War II. But they thought black skin made us impervious to heat stroke. And I actually read a story from this book about a slave that a doctor had purchased and literally roasted him, made him sit in a chair with hot coals underneath of it and covered him from the neck down with like a tent or whatever to literally roast him and just to see how long he could last. And then tried to give him different tinctures and such that were, it was snake oil. It was advertised as cures for heat stroke, but it was snake oil. And later on, I mean, I'm going to get to this part of the book, but I'll just mention it now. Later on, they thought our dark skin made us resistant to ionizing radiation, to beta particles. I'm also going to send this to Bink because I'm sure she's going to get a funny out of it. It's like we keep having to say the same fucking things over and fucking over again because white people it's not just that they refuse to listen, they just don't have to. And motherfuckers like Vosh and them don't acknowledge this, that anti-racism and this whole leftist fucking debate shit and all that is a completely fucking optional side quest for y'all. Whereas for us, just like we were saying last night, we don't get a break from this shit. We don't get to decide we log out for the day or whatever. We are niggas eternally. Kind of sounds like whatever theory allows for more torture is the theory they'll go with. That's the recurring theme in this book, for sure, Epiphany. Let's continue. But before we do that, though, I'm going to ban these fucking bots out of here. I'm sorry, y'all. Yeah. Okay. I'm not like these other fucking Twitch poll streamers. I don't like bots in my shit. I don't need to inflate my view count. Okay. Rush hungered to understand and hoped to duplicate the process by which Negro skin lost its color and he theorized that pressure and friction, violent rubbing, could banish color from the retimucosum, the fictional skin layer. Rush never took up the scalpel against Moss to test this theory, but he cataloged the methods that other physicians had used to whiten black skin and hair, including hydrochloric acid, bleeding, purging, the juice of unripe peaches, muriatic acid, and even pronounced fear. Rush did experiment with sulfuric acid on black skins, probably those of cadavers. So even in death, we weren't spared from these types of fucking experiments. In late 1796, Rush's protege, Dr. Charles Caldwell, acquired Henry Moss in a manner that can be read as disquieting infringement upon Moss's freedom. I took him in some measure under my care, procured for him suitable lodgings and accommodation, induced many persons to visit him, and kept him under my strict and constant observation, and by his permission, and for a slight reward, made on him such experiments as suited my purpose. That for a slight reward is important, because that means that that's not consent. That is not consent. Right? Although Caldwell was careful to note that he obtained Moss's permission, one has only Caldwell's word that Moss willingly accepted the loss of autonomy, social status, and income in exchange for quote-unquote suitable but heavily monitored lodgings. I am not convinced, in part because this scenario evokes an eerie parallel to one of the most infamous, exploitative, experimental relationships in history. That between Alexis St. Martin, a poor, illiterate French-Canadian backwoods trapper, and Dr. William Beaumont, who used him as an experimental subject for 11 years, beginning in 1822. St. Martin was a consistently reluctant subject, but Beaumont portrayed him as a willing one. Also, Caldwell's veracity is suspect. In his 1855 memoirs, for example, he falsely claimed that Moss's skin had regained its color. Caldwell forced Moss to exercise vigorously in order to produce perspiration, which he examined closely for exuded color. Caldwell also minutely recorded the expanding area of Moss's white skin. Admitting that he could not find Moss's retimucosum, Caldwell concluded that it must have retreated deeper into the body, away from the gaze of scientists. Only anatomical dissection can find it. Henry Moss was lost to history after he left Caldwell in 1796, his appetite for self-exhibition apparently sated, and within a decade his brand of self-promotion became unthinkable. The display of black bodies was conducted in a more repressive atmosphere as black-white relations grew ever more acerbic, fed by abolitionist fervor, large-scale slave revolts, and legal challenges to slavery. In 1806, for example, a very dark-skinned male slave owned by Major Banks of Williamsburg, Virginia, began to turn white. Dr. Alexander D. Galt urged that he be displayed as a spectacle that would excite the curiosity and wonder of everyone, but the slave remained voiceless and unnamed. And, you know, Nat Turner's rebellion was in 1830. And we're going to talk about Sarah Bartman in a minute. Let me let Bink know. Okay, sorry. She's doing something else, I guess. Um, Moreover, physicians and owners controlled and transformed the nature of the bodies they displayed by enhancing the distinctiveness of their appearance and by showcasing them in a propagandistic environment that emphasized freakishness, evolutionary inferiority, and bestiality. Barkers invented fictitious histories that emphasized the displayed specimen's alien nature. The features of displayed blacks were used to locate blacks' low status on a supposed evolutionary continuum between monkeys and whites. The paying hordes of voyeurs, museum curators, medical students, researchers, and professors at such medical circuses grew progressively more intrusive as gaping, sketching, photographing, and ribald taunts led inexorably to physical violation. Spectators palpated at a measured labia and penile lengths and tittered as they asked demeaning questions about subjects' personal habits and sexual prowess. This prurience reached its height in a display of the Hottentot Venuses. Let me let. If one wonders how Oda Benga or anyone else could have been clapped into a zoo in 20th century New York City, it is important to realize that there had been precedents. The most infamous medicalized display of a captive black befell Sartke Bartman, which means Little Sarah in Afrikaan. Jesus fucking Christ. Who was born in 1789, the year the French Revolution produced the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Bartman was, like Benga, a member of the Khoisan hunter-gatherers. She lived at the southeastern Cape of Africa in what is now South Africa. There, Bartman worked as a servant, perhaps an enslaved one, for Peter Caesar, a colonist who handed her over to British naval surgeon Dr. William Dunlop, who induced Bartman to sail with him to London in 1810. He assured her that she could quickly make her fortune, but Dunlop intended himself to be the beneficiary of her European debut. Bartman did not know she was about to enter an arena where she would become an object of unbridled medical curiosity and physical lust. Since the late 17th century, the Khoi had been regarded as the missing link between human and ape species. Theories that ranked ethnic groups consistently placed Bartman's Khoi people, like Oda Benga's, at the bottom of the evolutionary scale. On the basis of their supposedly overdeveloped genitals, Linnaeus classified the Khoi as a divergent branch of humanity, one that he named Homo monstrosus monorchidae, relegating them to the back alleys of evolution. In 1839, Samuel Morton described the Hottentot as the nearest approximation to the lower animals. Buffon classed them with monkeys. Khoi women's dramatically endowed figures, and especially their large fleshy buttocks, medically termed steatopygia, were seen as markers for their sexual prowess. Francis Galton, the father of eugenics, waxed rhapsodic about the extravagant figures of these women, declaring that they must be the envy of European belles. A popular ditty observed that the black African had not wit nor honesty to cover once his tail, hinting how much the Victorians had inferred about morality and intelligence from the relative nakedness of Africans. Most scientists agreed that the hot, damp tropical climate created a licentiousness and sexual profligacy in African women that was unknown among European women. And this is like 19th century too. The ascendance of medical theories about the alien attributes of black women had created a strongly sexualized interest in coy women. In 1819, Dictionary of Medical Science essay, excuse me, ethnologist J.J. Verret described black women as possessing a voluptuousness and degree of lascivity far beyond any known to whites. Abetted by their knowledge that many African peoples practiced female circumcision, scientists believe that African women in general and coy women in particular had oversized inner labia that hung down when they stood. Oh, yeah, nothing's new under the sun, yeah. Hidden labia, yeah, like Alien, you know what I mean? Except instead of an extra mouth, they got extra pussy lips. You feel me? That's the extra muscle that they're talking about. In the black men have the extra muscles in their ankles, and that's why we can jump higher and we're more athletic. And black women got the extra muscle in the vagina hole. Hang on, because I know my friend. I gotta send this because my friend's gonna be fucking mad. All right. The ascendance of oh sorry. Dunlop had accordingly arranged to put Bartman's body under anatomical scrutiny. Many of science made pilgrimages, excuse me, they invented entire fucking lore around black people. They did multiple times throughout history, just like they do right now. They're literally inventing lore. They're like inventing black Hebrew Israelite lore and shit about us right fucking now. Based off the like one or two of those people that they've seen in real life that absolutely no black person that has more than two fucking brain cells takes seriously. But because this is how people operate, this is part of being racialized, right? Where one member can represent your entire fucking class and race, whereas if there's just if like put it this way, people like Nick Fuentes can't possibly represent white people, but Kanye West and black Hebrew Israelites and shit, they can totally represent black people depending on the context of the conversation. It's they don't even realize that they do this. That's the first part. And I keep seeing I got some dropped frames, so I'm going to tell my it's like nah. I'll just chill for sorry. I had to change my VPN because my IP address kept changing. It was getting my nerves. Can you guys still see me? Am I still here? Everybody still with me? Still down? I knew I shouldn't have done this. There we go. All right, I'm back. All right. Dunlop had accordingly arranged to put Bartman's body under anatomical scrutiny. Many of science made pilgrimages to London's academic and medical settings to sketch, measure, and endlessly analyze her steatopygus, buttocks, and her extended inner labia, which they dubbed the Hottentot apron, or the sinus pudoris, Latin for veil of shame. Her body suffered regular violations that alternated between rape and the most intimate of medical examinations. One wonders whether she discerned much difference between them. She was displayed nude or bedecked in animal skins with accoutrements, spears, and bones that her handlers thought fitting for a Hottentot, as her people were disparagingly called by Europeans. Hottentot is an onomatopoeic name invented by early Dutch colonists to describe the inimitable clicking sounds of the Khoi language, but Westerners applied the term imprecisely to all short Southern Africans. Even Bartman's name was stripped from her and replaced with the sardonic sobriquet Hottentot Venus, and she was often portrayed with Cupid, the Western embodiment of carnal attraction, perched on her ample buttocks. Thus, in stark contrast to the real white Venus of sublime but unattainable beauty, Bartman embodied not only the boundary between man and animal, but also the lure of the bestial, the base, and grotesquely hypersexual. Bartman was not the only African woman to be exhibited as a Hottentot Venus, but she became an important exemplar of the medically exploitative display of black peoples. One may be tempted to think that the display of Africans such as Bartman is unconnected to the plight of their enslaved American contemporaries, but medical scientists viewed them as the same peoples. This era saw the burgeoning of academic ethnology, that branch of anthropology devoted to the study of race, and what scientists thought true of Africans was also believed of American Negroes. There was some biological and much social basis to this belief. Although many African Americans sprang from an admixture of African, European, and Native American forebears, myself included, approximately 1 in 10 American blacks was a native African, even after slave importation officially ended about 1810. Also, exhibited Africans were often black Americans who had been given manufactured exotic origins. So they would just kidnap niggas off the street and then make up like African backgrounds for them and like hand them spears and bow and arrows and like fucking plates for their lips and shit. But perhaps most important was the stubborn social denial of the widespread black-white intermingling in America. Thus, scientists insisted that what could be said of Bartman applied equally to her enslaved sisters in America. Over the next 5 years, Bartman met with much rougher usage. She was made to stand naked at parties of the wealthy and to impersonate a chained animal in garish Piccadilly, where the mob paid a shilling a head to gape and shout vulgarities. They began by staring at her in disgust, progressed to laughing at her, and ended up being aroused by her. Because black women were considered as shameless as European women were modest and chaste, such behavior was possible even for Victorian gentlemen. Sorry. Okay. Um, Many accounts of Bartman's life insist that she was a completely helpless victim of European impresarios. But in 1810, Robert Wedderburn of Jamaica, founder of London's African Association, complained to the authorities that Bartman was being demeaned. Interestingly, Bartman denied before an English court that she was being held against her will and indicated that she appeared in order to earn a share of the attraction's profits. However, no contract was produced and she probably received little or nothing of the hoped for profits, so she certainly was exploited. The next phase of her life left no room for ambiguous hopes. In 1814, London theater impresario Henry Taylor took her to Paris, where he paraded her in degrading animalistic displays and circuses amid the talking pigs, animal monsters, and human oddities. Taylor sold Bartman to an animal trainer named Rue, who provided her final descent when she was forced into a cage and made to behave like a wild beast. In 1815, the last year of her life, Bartman began drinking heavily, which may have contributed to her death from infectious illness at 27. She died at 27 years old. Western medicine was not finished with its Hottentot Venus. In 1817, Baron Georges Cuvier, the French zoologist and physiologist who founded the field of comparative anatomy, dissected her body, because of course they did. He was not an objective observer, having already been convinced of her people's inferiority. Their color is black, their hair crimped, their heads squashed, and their noses flat. Their protruding mouths and thick lips are strikingly similar to those of apes. The peoples which compose this race have always been savages. Cuvier cast Bartman's body in plaster in 1817, preserved her brain, vulva, and anus in glass jars, then stripped the flesh from her skeleton and hung it on display in Paris's Musée des Hommes. I fucking hate French and French people, so I don't care if I mispronounce that. He noted, she had a way of pouting her lips exactly like that we have observed in the orang-outan. Her lips were monstrously large. Her ear was like that of many apes, being small, the tragus weak. These are animal characters. Cuvier had once noted that Bartman possessed a tenacious memory. She also spoke Dutch, English, and French. Yet he left her this final assessment. These races with depressed and compressed skulls are condemned to a never-ending inferiority. She was a fucking damn near a polyglot. She was a polyglot. And No discussion of racialized American circus hucksterism can ignore the legendary P.T. Barnum, who exhibited many blacks. In 1835, which is the same year the Thomas Viaduct was finished being built, however, Barnum was just a 25-year-old bankrupt eking out a living in a New York City dry goods store. Joyce Heth catapulted Barnum to national fame after he purchased her from R.W. Lindsay, a promoter who had been unable to capitalize on the manufacturer identity he had created for Heth as the superannuated mammy of former President George Washington, who had died in 1799 but had already achieved political deity. We do not know Heth's actual origins, and Barnum's unreliable memoirs spin an assortment of contradictory tales, but he was able to convince audiences of Heth's manufactured or African origin and more. Heth debuted on August 10, 1835 at Niblo's Garden in New York and was a huge success as Barnum barked the tale of the greatest natural and national curiosity in the world, the black woman who had held the father of our country, her dear little George, to her breast, had given him suck, and who had taught him Negro spirituals. The claim that Heth had been Washington's nurse entailed an even more incredible assertion. Barnum swore that she was 161 years old, and many believed this. Heth's unusually black body helped to deflect skeptics because it was gnarled by a breathtaking decrepitude that simultaneously thrilled and repelled. Her Heth was skeletal. Barnum claimed she only weighed 46 pounds. Both legs and one arm were paralyzed, and her leathery skin was very deeply wrinkled. Her eyes were gone, the legacy of some unknown ailment. She was toothless, and her uncut horny nails curved like talons. Confronted with this grotesque sight, even lay spectators indulged in a medical gaze, touching her systematically, feeling the depth of her wrinkles, and taking her pulse. Their descriptions consistently identified Heth both with Africa and with death. Indeed, she is a mere skeleton covered with skin, and her whole appearance very much resembles a mummy of the days of the pharaohs, taken entire from the tombs of the catacombs of Egypt, declaimed one pseudonymous eyewitness. Even newspapers that avidly covered Heth's subsequent 7 months of appearances throughout the southern and mid-Atlantic states gravely discussed the merits of her claim to longevity, and some mused on its medical significance. The Evening Star, for example, averred that such longevity as Heth enjoyed was rare among northern blacks, but common in the South, their native habitat. That the sensationalistic penny press should have devoted articles to the fantastic debate is unsurprising, but so did sixpenny Whig papers that were usually inclined to greater sophistication and skepticism. But because many viewers refused to believe she was really 161 years old, Barnum announced that upon her death she would be publicly autopsied by a physician to determine whether she was a hoax. Of course, Barnum knew she was a hoax because she was his hoax. The voice spinning the fictional history was his. We're reading Medical Apartheid, Glaring Husky. Um, it's a book about the history of the medical industry in America with blacks, starting off with doctors who literally purchased slaves solely to perform medical experiments upon them. Something that's entirely separate from slavery, but equally, if not more horrifying. Um, Lots of horrific experiments I've described. We're currently on the phase of the book now that explores the history of blacks being put on display as circus exhibits and as medical theater exhibits, and how the line between those two things was blurred. Does it talk about how Bayer tested many things on the Jews during World War? No, this is about blacks. This is about African Americans. It's called Medical Apartheid. It briefly talks about that, but the focus of the book is on the medical industry and African Americans. Elephants and tigers have committed some radical anti-circus actions recently. I'm proud. Yeah. Sorry, I have to keep banning fucking bots out of my viewers. Yeah, the farmer. They're two heads in the same snake. Honestly, um, the farmer and we'll get there. We'll get there. So, Joyce Heth is unquestionably the most astonishing and interesting curiosity in the world. She was the slave of Augustine Washington, the father of General Washington, and was the first person to put clothes on the unconscious infant who was destined to lead our heroic fathers on to glory, to victory, and to freedom. To use her own language when speaking of her young master, George Washington, she raised him. Joyce Heth was born on the island of Madagascar on the coast of Africa in the year of 1674 and has consequently now arrived at the astonishing age of 161 years. The appearance of this modern relic of antiquity strikes the beholder with amazement and convinces him that his eyes are resting upon the oldest specimen of mortality they have ever beheld. Mortality was a revealing, even Freudian choice of words, because Heth's death was eagerly awaited, for only afterward could Barnum stage her public dissection. In fact, in Barnum's bogus memoirs, he described her as a remarkably old Negro woman who was swindling my friend, her former owner R.W. Lindsay, by her disgusting pertinacity to cling to life at his expense. Damn. So she was swindling him just by being fucking alive. Heth died the next year on February 19th, 1836. Barnum at first confirmed his belief in Heth's incredible age, but he soon announced that he had arranged for an autopsy in order to produce a scientific determination of the truth. Heth guaranteed Barnum's fame and fortune when he commissioned New York City surgeon David L. Rogers, MD, to dissect her publicly, a spectacle for which he sold 50-cent tickets. On February 25th, 1836, 1,500 spectators, 1,500 people, crowded New York City's saloon, whose exhibition center had been transformed into an operating room for the occasion, her very public dissection. The autopsy's real attraction was an unstinting satisfaction of curiosity about her fantastic body, without niceties or guilt. After all, one had paid for the privilege of vicariously participating in this quote-unquote scientific investigation. 40 years earlier, Charles Caldwell's examination of Henry Moss's racial distinctiveness had been supposedly voluntary, restrained, private, and non-invasive. However, Heth's was a bloodily invasive circus, and no one even asked whether she had consented. As historian Bernard Rice has noted, this important performance was both a titillating public entertainment and a pivotal scientific event that prefigured the dissections that would soon become commonplace with the bodies of African Americans. In the end, Rogers declared that Heth was a fraud because despite her physical disabilities, her relatively clear cardiac arteries proved that she could have been no more than 80 years old. Barnum reacted with an assortment of bold hoaxes. He visited New York Herald editor James Gordon Bennett to claim that the autopsy had been performed not upon Joyce Heth, but upon an aged black Harlemite named Aunt Nellie. Barnum assured the Herald editors that Heth was actually alive and well and being readied for a European tour. The Herald took the bait, the New York Sun did not. And the city's newspapers endlessly discussed and debated the results and meanings of the autopsy in warring accounts, accusing one another of falsifying accounts, of misinterpreting the autopsy's evidence, and of having been duped by Barnum. Barnum finally admitted that Heth was indeed dead, but the journalistic furor took 18 months to abate, during which time Barnum bamboozled yet another paper into publishing one of several divergent histories of Heth he had fabricated. In one of these accounts, Barnum described how he had compelled Heth to masquerade as Washington's old nurse. I soon got Joyce into training, and from a devil of a termagant. Excuse me. I soon got Joyce into training, and from a devil of a termagant, converted into a most docile creature, as willing to do my bidding as the slave of the lamp was to obey Aladdin. I discovered her weak point, whiskey. Her old master, of course, would indulge an old bedridden creature in no such luxury, and for a drop of it I found I could mold her to anything. Among other things, Barnum related using her whiskey addiction to inebriate her so that he could pull all her teeth in order to make her look older. Moss had been a living symbol of how easily the boundaries between white and black were traversed, but the owners of later racial exhibits such as Heth stressed the rigidity, not the fluidity, of the barrier between black and white by stressing, or manufacturing, the distinctly alien nature of black bodies. Around 1840, entrepreneurs realized that a market hungered for black exotica, and they took a leaf from the physician's book by displaying blacks as medical curiosities. Some were unquestionably enslaved, but other attractions were free blacks. All, however, were kept in quasi-legal bondage. A few black Barnum attractions had no especially racial component, such as Madame Aboma, the 7'9" African giantess, née Ella Williams, a former domestic from Eastover, South Carolina, or the enslaved Siamese twins known as Millie Christine, the two-headed girl. But for most quasi-scientific oddities, blackness was an integral part of their significance, such as a gaggle of unkempt black slaves who posed as wild men of Borneo, and of course Heth. In these cases, medical display was more than entertainment. It was also a dramatic argument for the alien inferiority of black bodies. Anonymous wild men have sometimes been surgically altered to resemble animal-human hybrids, such as Calvin Bird, who fled a circus and appeared at a Syracuse hospital, asking to have his surgically implanted horns removed. A supposedly mute black denizen of the wilds of South Africa with a very small head was enigmatically labeled Zip, the what is it or merely Zip. He was actually the normally verbal William Henry Johnson of Bound Brook, New Jersey. Such men were afflicted with microcephalia, a congenital disorder with no racial element, which is typically manifested by a small misshapen head and lower intelligence. However, according to their exhibit placards and carnival barkers, they represented the typical subhuman inhabitants of obscure African lands, some of whom did not enjoy the power of speech. Circuses also displayed blacks with disfiguring medical conditions such as elephantiasis. This parasitic infection blocks the circulation of lymph, causing lymphedema, in which affected limbs and digits swell to monstrous size. Elephantiasis sometimes caused the genitalia to swell, and black men with gargantuan penises and testes could be seen not only in the pages of medical journals, but also behind the veils of circus tents. Blind Tom, a black mathematical prodigy, was exhibited by his physician owner for years and became famous for his ability to make fiendishly complex calculations more rapidly and exactly than the scholars of his time. He was, however, an idiot savant incapable of the ordinary tasks of everyday living. Because he was black, his condition was often used to illustrate the deleterious effects of intense thought upon the inferior minds of blacks. But the intellectual histories of these exhibited subjects were often falsified, just as their life histories and bodies were. For example, Thomas Bethune, a slave born around 1850 near Columbus, Georgia, was ballyhooed as an untaught musical freak of nature. Actually, Bethune was a trained musical prodigy who gave piano concerts throughout the South and as a child and had performed for President James Buchanan at age 8. Bethune was proficient in the classical repertoire and capable of complex harmonic inventions. He played popular music superbly too, But rather than being regarded as an American Mozart, he was relegated to circuses and minstrel shows. He enriched his owners, but died penniless in 1908. A few attractions appeared voluntarily. In the Free States, some were former $2 a week roustabouts who realized that they could earn more as an exhibit than by engaging in backbreaking labor. Louis Agassiz, MD, the Swiss born naturalist, was in 1850 one of the most famous scientists in America. He was also more forthright than most in describing the physical revulsion that blacks evoked in him. He was a protege of Cuvier, and in 1846, when he immigrated to the United States in a professorship in biology at Harvard, he was immediately drawn to Philadelphia to view Dr. Samuel Morton's American Golgotha, a collection of 660 white, Indian, Eskimo, and Negro skulls. The term Eskimo here is archaic, as is Indian and Negro. You get the idea. Agassiz was opposed to enslavement and had originally believed that whites and blacks shared a species and a single origin. But upon his first encounters with blacks in Philadelphia, as he wrote to his mother, all the domestics in my hotel were men of color. I can scarcely express to you the painful impression that I received, especially since the feeling that they inspired in me is contrary to all our ideas about the confraternity of the human type and the unique origin of our species. I experience pity at the sight of this degraded and degenerate race. It is impossible for me to repress the feeling that they are not of the same blood as us. In seeing their black faces with thick lips and grimacing teeth, the wool on their heads, their bent knees, their elongate heads, their long curved nails, and especially the livid color of their palms, I could not take my eyes off their face in order to tell them to stay far away. God preserve us from such a contact. Wild. Apparently spurred by his viscera, Agassiz changed his mind about the confraternity of the human type and decided that blacks must have evolved separately from whites. The aforementioned antebellum scientific theory called polygenism, the belief in multiple origins for different races. However, his revulsion was mixed with a fascinated attraction. How else can one explain the many beautiful, ambiguously erotic, daguerreotype images Agassiz had made of nude or half-nude African Americans in Columbia, South Carolina in 1850? The scientific rationale for these 15 detailed images by daguerreotypist Joseph T. Zealy was a scientist's search for graphic evidence to bolster his polygynous conversion. The silver daguerreotype plates included frontal and side views of 7 Southern slaves, both men and women, and these did emphasize physiognomic features such as head shape, profile, and stance. However, these images also pay tribute to an undeniable beauty and celebrates the very bodies Agassiz decried as bestial. Like pornography, the daguerreotype images of black women reinforce the conventional representation of the black woman as a hypersexual being under the control of a white owner. For example, the women's clothes were pulled below their waists and breasts, and their nudity signaled sexual laxity and degradation, especially in contrast with especially in contrast with copious layers of protective clothing in which white women were always depicted. Branding, lash marks, piercings, and other marks of oppression and ownership were common and served to confuse the biological and social markings of inferiority. But in addition to clear markings of ownership, subjects often assumed erotic poses indicating that they were also sexually available. Um, Sorry. Had to look at something. Make sure my like Facebook chat and all that stuff is. Ready. Sorry, I had to stretch. And also, let me ban some more bots that I know are probably in here. No bots. Thanks for the like, Carmen. Many other Southern scientists and physicians, including Thomas Jefferson, wrote of their abhorrence of the black body, but their actions testified to its attractions. Some of the scientists who had cataloged and gaped at black bodies enjoyed sexual relationships with their black slaves and mistresses. Their concept of the Negro freak encapsulated simultaneous feelings of revulsion and attraction. Being men of science, they medicalized these feelings. In 1908, the New York Medical Journal observed, in most civilized countries, there are now enacted laws forbidding the public exhibition of monsters and revolting deformities. The genuine lusus naturae is, however, always a valuable subject of study for the scientific physician, which may add to our knowledge of development of normal types and may possibly illuminate any difficult and obscure problems in pathology. Thus, scientists justified in themselves the fascination they condemned in others, casting their own fascination with the black body as a medically important entity that represented the boundary between normal and abnormal, healthy and pathological, human and subhuman, and sometimes between black and white. But not just any black body. For exhibits, the normal bodies of healthy American blacks would not do. Exotica sold, particularly bodies with grotesque anomalies and malformations. Scientists invested heavily in public displays too. They desired evidence to sell the larger American public on medicalized racial inferiority theories that were already well entrenched in the slaveholding South. Many scientists who were enamored of Charles Darwin's 1859 theory that posited how apes and men sprang from a common ancestor also believed in an embellishment, that a continuous chain of evolution linked apes and men, and that the subhuman missing link was still extant. Scientists swarmed Africa in search of candidate subhumans. They found them and displayed them to the world. So this is what you're referencing when you're referring to people as subhuman, just so you understand this, right? It's not just a cool, funny thing to say that you got from Destiny. This is where Destiny got that from, okay? This is why we say you're probably fucking racist, because you do shit like this, you use language like this in conjunction with your other demonstrable behaviors. World's fairs were designed to present the exotic, to evoke wonder, and to hail scientific progress, and scientists at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair attempted to entrance in a manner that was eccentric even for this celebration of the unusual. The fair's anthropology wing showcased hundreds of strange persons in the World Congress of Racists who had been collected from around the world and were displayed in their natural habitats. Simulated villages and huts housed Igorots and Negritos from Southeastern Asia, as well as Malayans, Sinhalese, Pygmies, and Native Americans. These represented the human spoils of Western forced expansion into Africa, Asia, and other parts of the Third World. This human zoo of colonialism presented Westerners with dark-skinned savages as trophies of conquest and objects of scientific wonder. These people were displayed in St. Louis for the same ultimate purpose that Columbus had imported entire Native American villages to Europe. Columbus wished to show Queen Isabella where her money had gone and what peoples the Empire of Spain now encompassed. Curator W.J. McGee aimed for a panoply of evolution that was exhaustively scientific, from the highest to the lowest forms of man. Accordingly, the darkest blacks from the lowest known culture were contrasted to the dominant whites of man's highest culmination. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch proclaimed, African pygmies for the World's Fair, amazing dwarfs of the Congo Valley to be seen in St. Louis, some red, some black. They antedate the Negro in equatorial Africa, fearless midgets who boldly attack elephants with tiny lances, bows, and arrows. Another group of strange persons was found in abundance amid the huts, abodes, and teepees, psychologists. For the World Congress of Races was also a huge testing site. Columbia University's Dr. R.S. Woodworth led researchers in administering a battery of psychometric, and anthropometric examinations to 1,100 exotics. 4 pygmies were among the exhibited, and rudimentary intelligence tests were administered to help quantify how far below whites they fell on the intellectual scales. These exhibited test subjects must have had names, but only one name has survived. Oda Benga. So, keep this in mind when you cape for people who tout their credentials as mental health experts who casually use the R slur. Keep this in mind, that this is the history of the industry that they are in. Ugh. However, not every believer in a distinctive black physiology was a racist who wished to prove blacks innately and irrevocably inferior. Like African American scientists, some 18th and 19th century white physicians and statesmen worked to promulgate the belief that one could look different and yet not be inferior. So did abolitionists. Abolitionist and journalist Frederick Douglass proved a brilliant social analyst as he held his own in the scientific arena, demonstrating the illogic and manipulation in religious arguments for black inferiority while sidestepping the more reductionist and often apocryphal scientifical details. For example, he slashed the Gordian knot of comparative physiognomy by objecting to how scientists loaded the dice and making comparative images of relatively unattractive black subjects and unusually attractive whites with perfect Grecian profiles. It is fashionable now in our land to exaggerate the differences between the Negro and the European. The phrenologist or naturalist will invariably represent the highest type of the European and the lowest types of the Negro. If the very best type of the European is always presented, I insist that justice in all such works demands that the very best type of the Negro should be taken. The importance of this criticism may not be apparent to all. To the black man, it is very apparent. What did we just talk about with people being with representatives, right? And this is the type of shit that we talk about. This type of shit there has been literal black African American journalists, scientists, naturalists, etc., who have been debunking these claims about black people since they fucking brought us here. And all of that shit is casually, conveniently ignored because these people do not care about black people. They care about being the most correct. And when you have no accountability system for that, who is most correct is entirely subjective, right? And when that subjective point of view is immersed in white supremacy, you're literally always going to be appealing to people who are at least casually white supremacist. Case in point, there's all these people who, without a single fucking ounce of irony or self-awareness, claim that Vosh is the best spokesperson or the best representative that we have on the quote-unquote left because of his ability to circumlocute, while he literally drops hard R's, actively and aggressively alienates the black trans people and black people in general who would want to work with him and be in solidarity with him or be part of his audience. And none of us have any type of, like, motherfuckers think because he talks shit to Nick Fuentes that that's what makes him cool. Like, we don't have to deal with people like that in our daily IRL lives every fucking day, right? Like, I didn't just have Adam off and try to blow my fucking power grid up last weekend. Like, you can't search my name on Google right now and find an article about me literally redacted Nazis in the street. It's the most fucking parasocial and like it. I can't. James McCune Smith, MD, was another important critic. This brilliant African-American physician and statistical scientist was superbly equipped to refute the scientific racists on their own ground and did so regularly. His 1837 lecture exposing the scientific fallacy of phrenology took on the ethnologist essays and offered scathing criticisms of their logical sins in imputing character and intelligence from physiology. James McCune Smith, remember that name. I'm actually going to type because I know it's going to be, I just know I'm, oh God. I hate you people so much. I might really be Blitler because I hate y'all niggas. Anyway. I'm going to talk about P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum, who had performed in blackface as a youth, not surprised, capitalized on another important fad in skin color. He began to exhibit his encyclopedic collection of white Negroes. These were African Americans suffering from albinism, vitiligo, also called leukoderma, genetic mosaicism, and other medical conditions that whiten the skin. Such white Negroes were not unknown to Europeans, but in the mid-19th century, Americans facing a profound racial crisis suddenly found them fascinating. In 1846, Barnum hawked exhibits such as his twin Caffres, with bodies almost pure white, faces black as ebony, features perfectly human, noses, eyes, ears, etc., perfect miniatures of the Negro, covered with black woolly hair. These were albinos with artificially darkened faces and hair. Barnum also called them leucothiopes, or leucotheopes, Greek for white Ethiopians, or leopard boys. Black albino women were displayed with exotic manufactured histories and names, such as the Circassian Beauty. In 1850, Barnum displayed a black man whose skin was gradually but perceptibly lightening, who claimed to have discovered a weed that would gradually turn Negroes white. Barnum praised this discovery as a solution of the slavery problem, for the problem of slavery would disappear with their color. Did we or did we not have an entire discourse last year about how us wanting dark-skinned people to exist in the future is racist because racism will go away when people are all the same skin color? Did we or did we not do that? Matter of fact, that's deserving of a tweet. Let's fire that one off. I guess the source on that. Hang on. I really want the source for this. Oh, okay, I get it. Sorry, y'all. Had to fire that one off. Couldn't not. It was too perfect. Other entrepreneurs displayed many white Negroes the public seemed never to tire of. The medical fascination with the white Negro reflected the belief of some scientists who, pointing to the straight hair and finer features of property owning free blacks and of enslaved house servants, proposed that African Americans were turning white as a response to the civilizing influences of Western European cultures. Of course, African Americans were acquiring European features the natural way, but many whites maintained a high level of denial about the degree of black-white mating. On a superficial level, the spectacle of a black person turning white was simply a freakish reversal of nature, and the level of a bearded lady or on the level of a bearded lady or hermaphrodite. On another, deeper level, he posed an implicit threat to civilization, because white skin was held to denote evolutionary advantage during this period when most scientists insisted that whites were the superior humans or perhaps even the only true humans. If a Negro could turn white, what would become the special evolutionary status that whites enjoyed? If a Negro's black skin could be shed so simply, what, if anything, did it mean to be a Negro? Justification for slavery and unequal treatment of all kinds evaporated with skin color. As Charles D. Martin muses in his provocative book, The White African American Body, the white Negro was not only a freak, but a troubling one, even if his viewers could not articulate why. Interestingly, the circus circulars, carnival barkers, and even medical scientists who studied white Negroes tend to observe that along with their fading skin color, they lost the flattened nose, broader lips, and woolly hair that marked the Africans. This is a perplexing claim because the medical disorders that leach skin and sometimes hair color do not change the features. While one cannot be sure what motivated these extraordinary claims, the results of this irrational belief are clear. The purported loss of all external manifestations of race fueled the argument that to discover what constituted a Negro, it is necessary to go deeper under the skin, to dissect. The collective delusion that white Negroes were acquiring European facial features helped drive an impetus for the eventual surgical dissection of blacks to find the internal physiological markers and meaning of blackness. Not only did Barnum's White Negroes intrigue the public, but their exhibition also coincided with a fad in medicine. In every major city and in scores of smaller towns, physicians as well as gawkers hungrily thronged these exhibits. White Negroes posed a challenge to physicians who strove to understand the medical reason for and the medical import of this transformation. Physicians knew of albinism, a set of hereditary conditions that cause people to be born without the melanin that gives color to skin, hair, and the pupils of the eye. They had encountered a few blacks born with genetic mosaicism, which causes permanently mottled skin with both white and black patches. Medical descriptions of black hermaphrodites and leopard boys appear in the literature at least as early as 1754, and Charles Darwin had once given a photograph of such a leopard boy to the Museum of the Royal College of Surgeons. When a black person exhibited mosaicism or albinism, physicians wrote him up in medical journals, displayed him in hospitals, and sometimes took him on the road displaying him for money. However, doctors did not understand that most people who were born black but whose skin was gradually turning white suffered from vitiligo, a medical condition in which the skin's melanin-bearing cells, or melanocytes, gradually lose their color for a variety of reasons. This medical disorder affects both blacks and whites, but the darker skins of African Americans make vitiligo a very dramatic condition, whereas in whites it can be nearly imperceptible. Of course, scientists also knew that matings between blacks and whites could produce offspring who were very light-skinned or who appeared white. Conventional wisdom denied that white men were impregnating the black woman they owned, but the public display of a white child born of a black woman immediately evoked a spectral white father lurking in the background. Miscegenation is a misnomer for the matings between blacks and whites, because the word, from the Latin miscere, to mix, and genus, race, refers to matings between two separate races rather than the interspecies mating that takes place between whites and blacks in interracial relationships. However, such mating was denied by physicians and carnival barkers as the genesis of white Negroes. Whatever their genesis, most scientists took a dim view of the white Negro. They perceived in him or her a variety of challenges to the primacy, status, and security of the white race, and with it, to nascent American scientific culture. This is because the scientific culture of the 19th century still relied upon taxonomy or categorization. Movement within taxonomies, such as Carl Linnaeus' celebrated evolutionary scheme, was possible, but such transitions had to be logical, predicted by, and explainable by medical theory. It would not do to have categories, schemes, and classifications of peoples called into question by such unpredicted changes as Negroes, who inexplicably and illogically insisted upon turning white. They could not be explained by theory, so they contradicted and threatened the classification scheme and therefore the social order. Some men of science, notably Stanhope Smith, rightly deduced that intermarriage was causing the Europeanizing of black features and that eventually skin color distinctions could disappear if black-white unions were allowed to proceed unchecked. However, most scientists of the period believed that race was deeper than skin color and that a white Negro was still a Negro. The birth of white children from black mothers also reminded whites that untold numbers of Negroes passing for white, a social problem whispered of in polite society and broadly lampooned in the pages of popular newspapers and political circulars. Foreign visitors to the South, who often harbored anti-slavery sentiments, remarked openly upon the difficulty of discerning the race of people whom they met. When the Duc de la Rochefoucauld-Liancourt visited Thomas Jefferson at Monticello, he pointedly observed that his host owned many mongrel Negroes, or features showed the least trace of their original descent. So, isn't that weird how you have Vosh literally fucking repeating like 19th century race science about how racism will disappear if everyone's the same skin color, but also you have the avowed white supremacists that will tell you in no uncertain terms, we will still oppress you no matter what fucking color you are or where you come from? Isn't that fucking weird? Almost like he's not actually interested in gaining a nuanced analysis of these topics, and he's just more interested in building a cult of personality. Almost. If I didn't know any better, I would call him a grifter. But there seems to be a bunch of people on Twitter and Reddit who say that he is the best representation we have as leftists online, so I guess I'm just going to have to take their word for it, despite all experience and evidence to the contrary. Jefferson, statesman and scientist, found white Negroes very disturbing. When he wrote about them at some length in his 1783 notes on the state of Virginia, he took pains to banish the specter of miscegenation by recounting genealogies demonstrating that the parents of these anomalies were all unquestionably black. Because DNA evidence has lent credibility to claims that he fathered children with his enslaved mistress, Sally Hemings, there may have been personal motives for Jefferson's discomfort. Many scientists also speculated uncomfortably that Negroes who were born white would gain the capability to pass ad infinitum by bestowing their acquired white skins on their progeny. Perhaps this is why Jefferson undertook a survey to reassure himself that white Negroes were not proliferating. Such insecurities may also explain a peculiar corrective measure introduced in 1854 by a Dr. Leobergs of Mississippi. He announced that his medical research had produced a tincture that would make a white man black and would make his children black as well. Leobergs supplemented this discovery with a wash that would transform a white's hair into Negro wool. Interesting. It's almost like class is just as important as skin color when we're talking about race and white supremacy and anti-blackness. The fear that white Negroes would usurp the favored evolutionary positions of whites certainly abetted the belief, promulgated by scientific racists such as Josiah Nott, that mulattoes were too frail, feeble, and infertile to reproduce their own kind for many generations. In fact, the term mulatto comes from the Spanish word for mule, a sterile cross between a horse and a donkey. Wow. You learn something new every day, huh? Jefferson and other scientists who were desperately seeking distinctions between whites and white Negroes also differentiated between the disagreeable pallor of white Negroes and the healthily ruddy skins of true whites. Italian scientist Cesare Lombroso took pains to observe that authentically white skin was always touched with red, and that Negroes' inability to blush was seen as a distinctly racial characteristic that revealed a person's savage African race by revealing his inherent shamelessness. They're telling you right fucking here. You could read this shit if you want to, if you were actually interested in learning about these subjects, but you're not, so that's why I'm doing it for you. It doesn't matter what you fucking look like. They will always find a reason to do this shit. As long as the systems are in place, you will always find people who will point to shit as goofy as your inability to blush, or the texture of your hair, or the color of your eyes. It does not fucking matter what your skin color is. And to assert that racism would disappear or become less prominent as more and more people, as there becomes less variance in skin tone in the population, is itself literally a white supremacist fucking talking point. Straight from P.T. Barnum. The original fucking, and it's fitting because these fucking clowns belong in a circus. Just like the black people that they got put in there. Jefferson's quest to distinguish the Negro did not stop at the surface. He insisted that blackness resided not in the superficial, changeable skin of the Negro, but rather that it was a permanent badge of inferiority that resided deeper within the body. Whether the black of the Negro resided in the reticular membranes between the skin and the scarf skin itself, whether it proceeds from the color of the blood, the color of the bile, or from that of some other secretion, the difference is fixed in nature. Jefferson and his fellow scientific racists did not know what blackness was, and they did not know where it was. They only knew that it simply had to be there, permanently, somewhere. So knowing this, how in the fuck is everybody being the same skin color going to address negritude, as it's been called? These are the stupidest fucking people you could... I couldn't write. If I was trying to write satire, I could not make up a liberal in my head that is as fucking ridiculous as some of these people that then get lionized as our best representation by other equally fucking incredulous white people. Many scientists of the era, like their forebears, devoted themselves to pursuing the elusive inner markers of blackness. Dr. J.H. Gwenebolt compiled a list of 47 physical traits other than skin color that distinguish blacks. Josiah Nott made a list of 25, from black areas of the Negro brain to darkened blood and internal organs to the pendulous breasts of African women. Every scientist had his pet method for revealing a Negro, and not a single one of them involved just looking black or looking white. Cartwright and other early scientific racists had insisted all black racial attributes, visible and invisible, had one meaning. These differences indelibly marked the Negro as the inferior submissive knee-bender and son of Ham of the Bible. A change in skin color could not change this. Scientists had passed over the threshold of anatomical dissection as the popular event that Joyce Heth's autopsy had portended. Jefferson insisted that scientists seeking the seat of the Negro's blackness should resort to the anatomical knife, to optical glasses, to analysis by fire, or by solvents. And when we acknowledge this type of shit to say, hey, it's not just your skin color, it's your class. Right? When we acknowledge these things, they call us black supremacists, racists, etc., for having to fucking remind them, hey, you've been surrounded by white people your entire fucking life. You don't know what any of this shit means. Your entire, like we said last night, your entire life you've spent building that impulse to step to the other side of the elevator, or roll your windows up and lock your doors, or have your phone in your hand or ready, right? And you think that that goes away because you know that saying the N-word is wrong, because you feel bad for trans people. Late 19th century scientists had grown dissatisfied with biblical injunctions and impatient. Skin color had become a treacherous signal. Excuse me. Why is Twitter making me unfollow people that I clearly wanted to follow? Haymarket Books just came up in my who to follow. Fuck. And then it made me unfollow them again. What the fuck is happening? Okay. I'm not even gonna look at Twitter anyway. Let me check chat, make sure there's no fucking bots in here. Okay. Late 19th century scientists had grown dissatisfied with biblical injunctions and impatient. Skin color had become a treacherous signal, and whites were faced with an atmosphere of escalating social urgency. Ridiculed as barbarians by their former colonizer, England, and by most of Europe and by most of Europe as well, Americans felt they could ill afford to be characterized as a nation of mongrels and mere pretenders to white status. Black skin could no longer consistently and reliably designate a Negro, so it was critically important to find other means of detection. Physician scientists felt long delayed medical winds of change traversing the Atlantic that had made anatomical investigation with human bodies the gold standard of medical research. Driven by social changes such as the imminent failure of chattel slavery and the emergence of white Negroes, scientists were eager to delve more deeply under the skin of African Americans. They wished to discover clues to race that were more than skin deep, to invade the skin, to peel away the musculature, to unfurl the intestines, and to calibrate the bones. In this way, they felt they could understand the nature of race and regain control over the black bodies that were slipping from their intellectual and literal grasp. So, that's another 2 chapters. I think I'm going to call it for now. I'm going to figure out who to raid into. Joe Lewis is live. We'll raid Joe Lewis to return a favor from last night. And I might be on later today. I might do this again next weekend. Might be on tomorrow. We'll see. But at any rate, thanks for watching, you all. Thanks for understanding. We left off at chapter 4. And yeah, I'll catch y'all on the flip.